Thank you so much for joining us tonight. This is ITA's Safety and First Aid for Hikers. We're so excited you're here, here in the Treasure Valley. I don't know where you all are, but it's looking beautiful out tonight. So thank you for joining us on such a pretty night when you could be outside. We appreciate it. And if the urge to go outside just gets too great, just know that we're going to record this and we will send out the recording in an email, and you can watch the rest if you'd like, or if you know somebody that you think would benefit from it, you are free to pass that on as well. So we'll be covering lots of different resources throughout the night too. So we'll send all of that in an email. No need to try to jot down the hyperlinks and all that stuff. So to start off with, I'm Kelly Hughes. I'm ITA's Communications Director. Jim Findley and Ann Poinier are the ones who will be presenting tonight, and I will introduce them in a few slides. First, I just want to tell you a little bit about ITA and a couple upcoming events and things we have going on, and then we'll jump into the presentation. So, ITA was founded in 2010 to keep Idaho's hiking trails open. We have about 10,000 miles of hiking trails throughout the state, and many of those are not maintained to standards. So that's why ITA began to really try to take care of more trails across the state. So we do that with trail maintenance projects, volunteers. We take volunteers out and teach them how to take care of trails. And we use traditional skills like crosscut saws and Pulaskis to do that. We also do trail education and awareness. This is a good example of that, trying to teach people about how to stay safe and leave no trace and other good things to know when you're out hiking. And then we also do some advocacy and protection as well of trails. So like I said, we have volunteer trail projects all across the state. We have about 80 projects planned this year, and we always are looking for volunteers to help. So we have one day, weekend, week-long projects. And this year we have our first 3-week-long project as well. So we have projects for all different types of folks, for women, for youth, for university-aged people. So if you're interested, check out our website. We still have some projects open. Many of them are already filled, but we also have a wait list for all of our projects. So if you find one that you really like, that's full, just sign up on the wait list, and there's definitely a chance that a volunteer could drop off, and we'll invite you to come on the project. So it's a great opportunity to get out and enjoy Idaho's trails, and yeah, maybe see a different part of Idaho you've never seen before, and give back a little bit and meet new people. It's really fun. So that's what kind of the glue that holds ITA together is all of our volunteer trips and all the fun that we get to have out on the trail. So another thing we are always trying to encourage folks to do is to use our trail reporter to record any trails that you hike on. And if you see any problems on the trail, things that need fixing, we'd love to hear those things. So after you go on a trail, go out on a hike, if you could fill out our trail reporter, we'd be very happy to receive your reports. It's really just a short little survey about the trail and what you saw and what you experienced, and if there's any down trees or tread problems, anything like that with the trail. So so we have one more upcoming webinar this season. We kind of use spring as our time to do lots of webinars, and then everybody gets busy in the summer. So we don't have anything after this one, but check back in the fall. So our last one for this year is May 25th, backcountry nutrition. And that's going to be a really great webinar. It's a great way to learn some awesome ideas. If you're tired of packing those, buying and then packing those backpacker meals, this is a great way to learn how to make your own, and just learn about like the amount of protein and carbs and whatnot you need when you're out on the trail, because that's something a lot of people don't do very well. Pack too much, or they pack things that weigh too much for what you really should be bringing. So check that out. You can find that on our website, www.idahotrails.org/events. So now I'm going to introduce or hand it over to Ann and Jim. And these are two of our ITA volunteers. And we are just so grateful that they put this whole presentation together. And I'm going to ask them to tell a little bit about themselves and how they first got interested in ITA and all that. So Ann and Jim, are you guys ready?
Yeah, I'll go first. My name's Jim Findley. I've been volunteering with ITA for 7 years, and I've been volunteering with Idaho Mountain Search and Rescue Unit for about 7.5 years. And during that time, I responded to about 100 search and rescue callouts, and of those, about 12 were for missing hikers. So I've seen a few missing hiker mistakes. Anne?
Hi, I'm Anne Poinier. I'm a retired physician, and I've been volunteering for ITA for 4 years. And I got interested in ITA probably 5 or 6 years ago when I was on a 3-day trip through the Idaho backcountry, and I had scoped everything out the whole way except for a 3-mile stretch of trail. And that 3-mile stretch ended up taking us 5 hours to get through because the trail was in such disrepair. So after I saw that, I was like, I'm going to help clear these trails because it makes it a lot safer for everybody and certainly more enjoyable. So that's how I wound up here.
Nice. I wanted to mention one thing I forgot to say, that we are going to ask people to save your questions for the end, and we'll do questions and answers at the end. So if you have anything that you want to say, just jot it down, and then we'll open up the chat at the end for any suggestions or questions.
Okay, these are the topics we're going to try to cover tonight. I'm going to start out talking about planning and communications. Then Anne is going to talk about fitness and gear. Then I'll talk about safety on the trail. And Anne will finish up with injuries and first aid. Making a plan enhances your preparedness, safety, and enjoyment of your trip. I enjoy planning, and it's an important. There are lots of resources online and in print to help you plan your trip. The next bullet is the most important thing I'm going to say during this presentation, and that's to communicate your plan to a trusted contact. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about mobile phones, PLBs, and satellite messaging for communication and navigation. So making a plan should include assessing yourself and your group, picking a route that's appropriate for your group, having a backup plan or an emergency plan, looking at the weather forecast, but not only the anticipated weather, but what the worst case weather could be, what to be prepared for. And then finally, what to bring. Anne is going to talk more about what to bring, but another point to make is what not to bring, because you don't want to take things that you don't need, because heavy packs increase the risk of injury. Okay, communicate your plan to a trusted contact. I have an example of a contact who couldn't be or wasn't very trustworthy. I read a story about a woman in Utah. She was from out of state, but she was hiking in Utah, and she left her planned route and a time that she expected to be back with the front desk at the motel. And during her hike, she got hurt and she couldn't make it back. But she expected that that someone would come and look for her, you know, that night or the next morning. And so she made herself comfortable and waited. And no one reported her missing for 4 days. But they found her and she was okay. So it had a happy ending. But your trusted contact should be someone that you can trust will determine whether you have made it back and will contact the authorities if need be. So what should you tell that trusted contact? You should tell them your route, your objectives, could be climbing a peak, fishing, photography, et cetera, et cetera. What are your alternatives? Because you might not be able to go with your original plan. There might be roads closed, there might be too much snow, there might be streams that you can't cross. So you should have a backup plan or an emergency plan. You should communicate that to your trusted contact as well. Your contact info, when you expect to return, and when your contact should contact the authorities. And then very important, you need to check in with your contact when you return, because you don't want to be safely back at home and have your contact tell the authorities that you're missing. If you don't communicate your plan to a trusted contact and something goes wrong, you're really on your own, because no one knows where to look for you and they don't know when you were expected back. Okay, important part of planning is doing a self-assessment and an assessment of your group or your companions. You should look at your skills and experience, your fitness, and you know, I have here consider functional conditioning, because the best way to prepare for hiking is to hike. If you're a swimmer, you have very good cardiovascular fitness, but that's not necessarily the best preparedness for hiking. Medical conditions. You should tell your companions what medical conditions you have that could affect your hike. And for instance, I have asthma, so I carry a rescue inhaler. So I try to remember to always tell my hiking companions that I have asthma and where I keep my rescue inhaler in my pack. And then hiking with a companion or a group is always safer than traveling alone. There's a big statistical search and rescue database, and it's compiled in a book called Lost Person Behavior. But they looked at, the database includes more than 12,000 search and rescue incidents and more than 3,000 for hikers. And according to this database, 2/3 of missing hikers are traveling alone. Okay, some considerations in determining your route. You need to think about the distance you can cover, the terrain. Is it steep? Is it rocky? Is it forest? Etc. Stream crossings. Do you have to do stream crossings? How significant are they? Elevation gain. If you look at this trail profile down below, you can see that this hike has a net elevation loss, but it still has significant elevation gain, because it drops down into a valley, back up to a ridge, and then back down into a valley. This was the hike in for one of the ITA trips last year in the Seven Devils. And this map was made on CalTopo, which is a free phone app that you can use. So you see the map and you can see the trail profile below. Some other things to think about are altitude. If you're going to be hiking at a hot altitude much higher than you're used to, you're probably not going to be able to make the same time, make the same progress that you would normally make, and you may have to spend some time acclimating. And then another thing to think about is the aspect. And by that, I mean a north-facing slope would have a north aspect. So on north-facing slopes, there'll be more snow cover. And on south-facing slopes, there'll be more sun exposure. And an example of that is if you look up at Bogus Basin from Boise in June, you probably won't see any snow, because you're looking at the south aspect. But on the north aspect, there will be a lot of snow. And a lot of people get in trouble that way particularly on the Round the Mountain Trail at Bogus Basin, they look up at the mountain. It's a sunny day, and they go up there, and they're on a south-facing slope, and there's no snow. But when they hike around to the backside, there's lots of snow to the north side, north aspect. And the funny thing is, what people do when they get into a situation like that, they don't like to backtrack. They always think it's going to get easier ahead, so they get deeper and deeper into the snow. Okay, this graphic on the right comes from the National Park Service, and they say that a cell phone is not a light source, not a map, not a survival kit, and not always going to have reception. You can use your phone as a light source, but you're gonna run out of battery pretty quick. You can use your phone. Your phone does have mapping, can have mapping apps, but you're not always going to have service. And so if you haven't downloaded the maps in advance, it's not much of a map. Some other things about mobile phones: texting uses less battery power than calling, and texting sometimes gets through when a call won't. All carriers accept 911 calls. So if you have T-Mobile and you don't have service, Verizon will still pick up your 911 call if you can connect with Verizon. Your text or phone call may get through even if you don't receive a reply. So if you're in trouble, calling or texting 911, the 911 operator may get your call and they may get your location, even though you don't receive any reply. So if you're relying on your phone, you need to conserve the battery. If you have poor or no service, your phone is constantly going to be looking for service, and that uses a lot of battery. So you can put it in airplane mode. You can also reduce the brightness of the screen. That'll make your battery last a lot longer. I've used my phone for a week as a camera when it was in airplane mode, whereas normally I have to charge it every day. Another good thing is to know how to get the coordinates from your phone. There's lots of mapping apps that'll tell you your coordinates. And if you call 911 and you can tell them your coordinates, you'll get rescued a lot faster than otherwise. But even with just Google Maps, you can go on Google Maps and go to your location, assuming you have service, and hold your finger down, and it'll give your coordinates in degrees, decimal degrees. Okay, PLBs and satellite messaging. So this technology is changing very rapidly. Personal locator beacons, they're basically a panic button it sends your coordinates to a monitoring agency and basically says you need help. And they'll contact the local sheriff's department, and they're going to send somebody, because if it's just a PLB with a location, they don't know the situation, so they're going to send somebody. So you need to be careful about pressing these buttons, and some people do it by accident. What's become much more common now is satellite messaging devices like Garmin InReach. And so these are good safety tools. If you have a satellite connection, which you usually will if you have a good open sky, you can send a message to the authorities or to your friends. I don't have one of these because the minimum plan is about $12 a month, but there's new devices coming out all the time. And I think Motorola is coming out with a device this month where the plan is, the basic plan is $5 a month. So they're getting more affordable. The other thing that's happening now is some phones, or at least so far the iPhone 14, has emergency satellite messaging. So in an emergency, you can, if you have a satellite connection, you can reach someone with an iPhone 14. T-Mobile is talking to Starlink about offering emergency satellite messaging with their service. So I suspect in a year or two, probably almost all cell phones will have emergency satellite messaging. Of course, you still have to get a satellite connection, which generally means having a lot of open sky above you. So don't try to send your message when you're in a cave or under a rock or something. Okay, navigation. In our search and rescue unit, every team carries a paper map. A paper map doesn't need batteries and doesn't fail when you drop it, etc. But all of our members carry a compass and a GPS with extra batteries. And normally we use the GPS for navigation, but we're all trained in map and compass. So it's good to have redundant systems. And a lot of people use phone mapping apps as well. And these are super, you know, they work really well. But if you haven't downloaded the maps before you go on your trip, you're relying on cell service, which you may not have. And phones and GPSs can both, you know, they rely on their battery. And so, and they can both fail. If I was, I don't recommend relying solely on your phone, but if you're relying on your phone, it's good to have a backup portable phone charger. But the other thing about navigation, it doesn't matter if you carry a map and compass and a GPS and everything if you don't know how to use it. So it's good to learn how to use it. One way is to practice. When you go on a hike where you know where you are and you know where you're going and you're familiar with it, take your map and your compass, your GPS, your phone app, and practice with it. Yeah, all of these skills are perishable, and it's important to practice. Secondly, get some training. RAI used to teach map and compass. I know that because Idaho Mountain Search and Rescue Unit used to teach it for them, but they're no longer doing that. But they have some really good articles on their expert advice page on navigation, and the link is on this slide. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over to Ann, and she's going to talk about fitness and gear.
Hi. So this is pretty brief and pretty common sense, but the first important thing is to be physically prepared for the trip that you're proposing doing. And ideally being over prepared in case you have a longer hike out than you had previously planned on, or you have to help carry another person out of the backcountry or carry their gear if they're injured and they can't carry their own gear. So, you know, to go off the couch and say, oh, I'm going to do a 20-mile hike in a day is just unrealistic. But more importantly, it's just not a safe thing to do. So we always recommend starting by hiking shorter distances without weight. So just get your legs used to walking, and then increase the distance and then your elevation gain gradually. Also get your feet into hiking condition. And that includes hiking when you have a pack on. So shoes and boots will behave very differently if you're wearing a 60-pound pack versus if you're not wearing any weight. And those pieces of footwear will also behave differently if you're hiking uphill versus hiking downhill. So you want to get your feet used to that. And also don't forget strength and balance training and include core strength. And I just provided a couple of really good links that you can check out. And also use your local resources. There are a number of really great gyms in Boise and throughout Idaho. And if you have a great physical therapist who you trust, you can check with them for some easy exercises to do so you're ready to go. And it just makes hiking much more fun when you're strong and it doesn't turn into a suffer fest. As far as what to bring, the 10 essentials were discussed in the Backpacking 101 that was done earlier this season. And I always consider the possibility of an unplanned night out, even if I'm going for a day hike. I usually will carry something as far as shelter goes, just in case somebody gets hurt and we inadvertently have to spend the night out. And also consider unanticipated changes in the weather. You know, you could have a beautiful forecast and nothing's on the horizon, and then you get hit with a thunderstorm. And if you don't have the gear to cover up and keep warm, you're going to get into trouble. And then always kind of customize what you're bringing with your objective. So if you know you're going to get up into the snow, bring some snowshoes or crampons. If you know you're going to be doing a lot of stream crossing, bring a second set of shoes to do those crossings. And then, of course, mountaineering gear if you're getting into some more technical hiking. So the 10 essentials, which should be appearing here. Here they are. I won't belabor the point, but these are just a great reference every time you go out hiking. You don't have to obviously have all of these, but customize these. You don't need a tent and a bivy sack and a tarp. It's either or. But I bring a headlamp with me always. It doesn't matter if I'm going for a short day hike. I just know that if it gets dark, you have that with you. And I always bring rain gear with me, even if the weather's good, or another layer, and plenty of gear to purify water. And then plenty of food. And I always over plan, take more than you need, not too much extra weight, but just make sure you have plenty of calories. And then the other thing in the 10 essentials, which we've gone over before in the backpacking 101. As far as a first aid kit, this too is customizable depending on your activity, but always bring one, even if you're going for a day trip and you, I don't know, have a laceration, you fall down on a rock and you have, a 6-inch long laceration on your leg. If you don't have a first aid kit or a rudimentary amount of equipment to take care of that, that could turn into a big problem. So even if you're doing a short day hike, there are a ton of kits online, and most of those backpacking related ones are super lightweight, but you can also make your own. And we'll provide an email at the end, I think, that will include a number of ITA kits that you can make up yourself and the weight of each of those. And you can bring a lot of stuff that makes you really well prepared without carrying too much weight. Here's a build yourself one, and you can go back through the slides and reference this. But this is pretty typical of what we carry on an ITA trip. And then the other thing, as far as gear goes, consider bringing trekking poles. When we were looking over the causes of accidents, falls are far and away the highest likelihood accident that people will have out there. And you just have more balance if you have 4 points of contact with the ground. They're super great for doing stream crossings. You can share them with your group if there's some weird ground that you want to get over and people need extra balance. And they also can be multi-purpose. They can be used as a splint. You can use them as a cane if someone has a sprain. You can use them as a support for a shelter if you want. So they're pretty darn handy, and I take them with me whenever I go, even on a day hike. And then the other bit of information is to just take really good care of your feet and bring footwear that's appropriate for what you're doing. If you're going on a shorter day hike or you're going to do a fast and light trip, wear a lighter weight shoe. But if you're going to be doing heavy work, where your feet can get have something land on them, using a heavier hiking boot makes more sense. And take time to break in your boots. It's absolutely worth it. If you tear up your feet, getting out of the backcountry can be really, really difficult. And Elisa covered this in Backpacking 101, but if you feel a hot spot, stop, take your pack off, sit down, look at your feet, and treat those hot spots before they turn into blisters. And then just a note about when you are in camp, if you're camping overnight, bring another pair of footwear, full coverage, because people can get injured in camp just as easily as they can when they're out hiking. All right, that's it for me.
Okay, I'm going to talk about staying safe on the trail once you get on the trail. Okay, first thing is don't get lost. The reference I mentioned before, lost person behavior, says that 2/3 of hikers, that 2/3 of search and rescue incidents that involve hikers are for hikers that got lost. And that may seem obvious, but less than 10% are for medical issues or injuries. And most of the balance is for overdue hikers that weren't lost, they were just overdue. But in order to not get lost, it's good idea to start found. And one way to start found is to orient your map and identify landmarks at the trailhead. So before you leave the trailhead, make sure you know where you are on the map. Orient your map so the top of the map is pointed north, and look around you and find peaks. This is usually pretty easy in Idaho, not so easy in a place like Michigan, where you're in the middle of a forest and there's no mountains, but it's easy in Idaho usually if there's visibility. And you may see a peak from the trailhead that you're going to see all day, and just that gives you visual orientation the rest of the day. As you're proceeding, if you're in doubt about where you are, don't keep pressing forward, which is what a lot of people do. Pause and reassess and try to figure out where you are. Use your navigation tools to try to figure out where you are. If you cannot figure out where you are, consider backtracking to the your last known position and reassessing. And a lot of people don't want to do this because it's extra energy and extra time, and they don't want to take it. But a lot of people get in trouble by pressing on when they're not sure about where they are. Most people get lost at decision points. A decision point can be a trail junction, social trails, game trails, and places where the terrain kind of directs you in one direction or the other. And an example of this is up on the Shingle Creek Trail in the Boise foothills. The trail follows on the left side of a creek, and then all of a sudden it makes a sharp left-hand turn. But a lot of people have gone straight following the creek, and so there's a social trail there. And if you're not paying attention, super easy to miss the direction the trail goes.